order. The hearing is now resumed. Good morning. You solemnly affirm that the evidence to be given by you to this hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I need a word by group. Thank you. And your name, sir?
Rod McMahon. Rod McMahon. Gary Dukeman. Edwin Newman. Robert Mountain.
Thank you. Counsel?
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, as has been the practice for the last few days, Commission Counsel's examination in chief will consist primarily of introducing the witnesses and having witness summaries marked, which will amount to the lion's share of our examination in chief. I'm going to start on the left and move to the right. First we have Mr. Rod Naknakam. Sir, you're a member of the Cape Mudge Indian Band,
That's right.
and you're currently the chief negotiator for the Lac-Wiltac Treaty Society.
That's right.
And the Lac-Wiltac Treaty Society is made up of 3 bands, I understand,
That's right.
and those are Cape Mudge, Campbell River, and Quayaka.
That's right.
Okay. And you had an interview with Commission Counsel on December 7th of this year.
Yes.
Okay. And we prepared a summary of that, and you've had a chance to review that.
Yes.
Okay. If we could have that document brought up, please. I've just got it on the screen here. You've reviewed this, and you adopt its contents?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. If that could be marked as the next exhibit, please, Mr. Registrar.
Exhibit 297.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Dukeman.
Yes.
Sir, you're here on behalf of the Métis Nation.
That's correct.
You're a professional biologist,
That's correct.
and presently you're the Director of Natural Resources for the Métis Nation.
Yes.
And you had an interview with Commission Counsel on November 17th of this year,
That's correct.
and you've reviewed the summary that we produced of that.
I have.
And are you content with this contents?
There are a couple of fairly minor changes.
Okay, if you could maybe just take a moment and take the Commissioner through the changes that you'd like to make, identifying the page and the particular change.
Okay, page 1, last paragraph. The sentence says the buffalo remain an important part of Métis history and cultural events, and some Métis are now involved in the effort to recover buffalo populations in Alberta. It should actually read, historically, Métis were involved in efforts to recover buffalo populations, period.
Thank you for that correction.
Second page, under historic and modern participation in the fishery, last sentence, many Métis have family connections in First Nations and rely on these connections for opportunities to fish. I would just insert and sometimes rely on these connections for opportunities to fish.
Thank you.
Will I be challenged with wordsmithing? Second last paragraph, Aboriginal people have always relied on, believe the salmon feed the environment where they live, rather
Okay,
than
just
the
make sure
environment.
you're on the second to last paragraph on page 2.
Yes, that's correct.
And the third line of that?
Yeah, so Aboriginal people have always believed that salmon feed the environment where they live, rather than feed the environment they live.
Right. Thank you.
Last paragraph, last sentence,
On the same page?
yes.
Okay, so still on page 2, the last paragraph of your summary.
In part, recommendations relating to listings and recovery plans directly to the Minister of Environment rather than to directly the Minister.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay. So with those changes made, are you prepared to adopt the contents of your summary?
I am.
Thank you for that, sir. We could have that marked as the next exhibit, please.
Exhibit 298.
Thank you. Good job. You are President of the Council of the Haida Nation?
President of the Haida Nation.
President of the Haida Nation. You've also held the position of fire keeper for their hereditary chiefs of Haida Gwaii?
Yes.
And you had an interview with Commission Counsel on September 8th of this year?
Must have been.
In September of this year. We produced a summary. Have you had a chance to review it?
Yes.
Okay. And you prepared to adopt the contents of your summary?
One change. On page 3, second to the bottom, it says abundance of salmon stocks. In that instance, I'm speaking of herring stocks.
Okay, let me just see. I'm on page 3 of the summary. And you're on which paragraph?
Second to the bottom.
Yes, I see that. On the first line, the word salmon should be replaced with herring?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that correction. Aside from that, are you content with the contents?
Yes.
If that could be marked as the next exhibit, please.
Exhibit 299.
Mr. Hickling is going to conduct the first examination of the panel.
My name's James Hickling, spelled Hickling. And I'm representing the Wequefuck Treaty Society. And the other members of the standing group are, excuse me, the Aboriginal Aquaculture Association and Chief Harold Seward. Mr. Naknakam, I wonder if you could briefly describe your own experience in the fishing industry.
I was born and raised in Cape Mudge. There's no river there, but our people have always been strongly involved in the fishing industry. I pretty much grew up on a seine boat with my grandfather, Harry Asue. I started going out with him on the boat since I was 8 years old, and continued right through until I finished university. The whole, I don't know where to start on this, but the whole village has always been involved. My grandfather told me about his father, Chief Billy Asue, who helped get the people in the village involved in the salmon fishing industry. And in fact, we started buying gas boats in the 19-teens, Troll and Gillnet. Then 1921, Chief Billy Asue was successful in getting the regulations to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans changed to allow us to go seine fishing. And I guess in the heyday, you'd see up to 40 seine boats being operated out of our village. And just about the same with the Campbell River Band. Today, now, it's probably less than half a dozen, because of the nature of the industry, how it's going.
And you have participated in several organizations that deal with fishing issues. Could you say something about that?
Yeah, I guess my first experience has been with the Native Brotherhood of BC. The Native Brotherhood was designed somewhat like a union, where the members paid the dues and had a delegate system for each of the branches. And our branch was the Cape Mudge Comox Qualicum branch. And I got involved fairly early in being a delegate to the annual conventions. I got involved in writing a lot of the resolutions. And those were very enjoyable because we got to know everybody on the coast that's in the industry. Later on, after I became a lawyer, I got hired to set up the Native Fishing Association as executive director, which had money, about $11 million, to lend out to Native fishermen to buy boats and licenses. And then later on, I got on the board and became chair of that organization for a while. During my career as a lawyer, I got involved with our fishermen in the Johnson Straits, and was a co-chair of the Area 13 Salmon Seiners Association, which had one mandate, and that was to address the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. I was particularly proud of that organization because it managed to get about 7 or 8 groups together that never normally spoke to each other. In fact, actually fought with each other. Got us all together to deal with DFO's policies on openings and closures. I'm currently involved with the Aboriginal Aquaculture Association as an advisor. That organization, its main objective is to build the capacity for First Nations to get involved in aquaculture. What's happened is a lot of the boat owners that are still hanging on their boats in the industry can't just make it on salmon and herring anymore. They've got to diversify, keep their boats active, and that's what we're trying to do there. Well, I used to be I still am, I guess, the advisor to the Atligay Fisheries Society, which has 5 member bands. The 3 that belong to our treaty society, plus Comox and Cloudsies. Those other 2 bands have overlapping areas with us where we have shared territory, and we work together. And the main objective there is to try and build our capacity to deal with Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and to keep statistics on our fishing and our food, social and ceremonial fishing.
A few questions about the area in which LKTS is centered, and I'd like to refer to this map. It's the Commission circulated it a couple of weeks ago. I have quick copies on all council's desk, and multiple copies with Mr. McGowan. And I see Mr. Lund's brought it up on the screen. Rod, do you have a copy of this?
It's on the screen.
Oh, thanks. I want to emphasize, Mr. Commissioner, that we're not relying on this map to establish the boundaries of Lekwaltok territory. It was just a convenient map for us to use to provide an overview of the Johnson Strait area. Mr. Naknakam, if we started at the southern end of the territory where it joins Vancouver Island, the first 2 islands there are Denman and Hornby.
Yeah, our territory goes down to around Qualicum River, then all the way up to Eve River on Vancouver Island.
Great. I just want to focus on the geographical features of the Johnson Strait area. If you travel up from those islands, you pass through some open water, and then you come to another big island.
Yeah,
That's Quadra Island.
that's right.
And the southernmost tip of Quadra Island is called,
How do we do this? Oh, put it out up there.
Commissioner, I provided the witness, or had the witness provided with a laser pointer so he can identify for you where he's speaking of. And I'd perhaps just ask council to ensure it's described on the record adequately.
okay.
Yeah, that, about halfway up Quadra Island, you'll see the narrowest point there. It's called Seymour Narrows. That's generally considered where Johnson Strait starts. And it goes all the way up the narrow along, that stretch along the east coast of Vancouver Island. But the thing about Seymour Narrows, it's got very strong tides, and just above it, there's two bays. There's Plumper Bay, which is the first bay just above the Seymour Narrows, and then just above that is Deepwater Bay. Now, we've been doing a lot of research in our treaty society, and we've come across a lot of fish traps all over the place. And in these two bays, there were fish traps that date hundreds of years back. And there's no significant river in those bays. So we think that those fish traps were designed to catch passing stock that's going to the Fraser. Then when cannery got started in Kwatiaski Cove, the owner set up modern fish traps in the 19 and it was there particularly to catch sockeye that's going to the Fraser. And there is correspondence verifying that. And what he talked about is the particular quality of the fish at that point. He was able to get best prices there because it had the highest oil content. Once it went further down into the Gulf, it started losing that quality. We have other fish traps further up towards the mainland that we think are designed for passing stocks as well. And of course we have a number of fish traps and mouths of some of the rivers there all along the mainland. Our origin story and flood story is on the mainland it's about 30 miles north of Campbell River. On the mainland, on the mountain, and when we moved south, north, I guess we moved all over the place, but mainly in and around Johnson Straits. We just basically lived off of Johnson Straits.
Geography of Johnson Strait influences the migration of the Fraser River sockeye?
Well, we got pretty good at it, at catching particularly sockeye, which is the main it's got the highest value in terms of sales. And we all our different families have different setting spots. You know, we know where the Sioux fished, the Lewises, the Dicks, Roberts, Quack Sisters. We pretty much had our own kind of areas where we fished, and those areas were identified by certain stages of the tide. You can't just sit anywhere and catch the fish. It's usually on low water slack that you have to set at these spots, and you get very good sets. So those places are still being used by those families today.
When the salmon are migrating south through the Johnson Strait area, is it your experience that they swim through north to south in one continuous?
Not all the time. They'll go back and forth along the straits. Sometimes they'll hang around for quite a while. But once it starts raining hard, they'll just shoot right through.
Can you describe briefly the significance of fishing to the Lekwahawk people?
Well, I think we're all the same on the coast, actually. The fishing has been a central part of our identity. You know, we're the same as everybody else. We, despite the potlatch being prohibited and outlawed until '72, we still potlatched right through. My grandfather, my father's side particularly, he used to have big speakers outside his house. He had a big house, and he'd have hymns playing, but inside he'd be potlatching with the elders. And we've been able to keep this alive amongst our people, but there always is salmon, part of the potlatch, you know, to feed. But more than that, there's songs, my brother's wife is a twin, and she owns a salmon dance with her twin sister, because that's what we do is, give that to the twins. And of course, it's got all kinds of carvings of salmon. They're on everything, like totem poles and plaques, our walls, and our button blankets. We have songs about it, dances about it. It wasn't just the salmon, but it was everything kind of integrated together. Our people, we make our living off of the salmon, so it's pretty important to us. We want to make sure they come back every year because we've got members that still have heavy investment in the industry, and that's what we're trying to concentrate on is to keep them in the industry. We don't want to be removed from the water. We've got to be part of the water, because that's how we keep healthy. We fished on. We had hooks, all kinds of design of the hooks. And when the industry started in the 19 teens, my grandfather designed his own spoon to troll with. We just knew how to adapt to our different circumstances.
I'd like to ask if conservation has played a role in Muckletuck fishing practices.
Most definitely. We've faced the first real big closure, I guess, and I wasn't involved in the herring industry, but my grandfather was. Tells me a story when him and Tommy Hunt went to see BC Packers, and they shut down the herring industry. And it did get shut down for 20 years because they were fishing it out. With the help of the company, they were able to persuade DFO to do that. Then in, I think it was the 80s, when we put the ribbon boundary in Johnson Straits. They wanted to close us down. We convinced DFO we could stay open and still fish if we marked off certain areas in Johnson Straits that we wouldn't fish in. And we called it a ribbon boundaries, and we still don't fish there today. And, we're the ones that initiated that effort.
Are areas that are off limits to Lekwitog fishing, and they allow
All commercial fishing.
and they allow passing stock to travel through Johnson Strait.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you a few questions about traditional knowledge. Is there a particular skill set or knowledge that's required to fish effectively in Johnson Strait?
Yeah, it's not the easiest place to fish because of the strength of the tide. Back in the earlier day, you could lose your net fishing the wrong place or the wrong stage of the tide. The timing of the set is all the difference in the world, whether you're going to get any fish at all. My grandfather always amazed me on how well he knew the water and when the fish were coming. How many, we'd be waiting out there on the boat, and there'd be some killer whales going by. You'd stand up on the seat on top of the cabin and whistle at them. And they'd come up wherever they are, and then pretty soon they're rubbing against the boat, and then they're passing on. But what my grandfather was famous for is predicting the size of the run that's coming in. And we'd often get into fights with DFO. We'd be in their office telling them to open it. There's a big run coming. And quite often he was right. That amazed me. And our guys, they got to know which run was which, just by looking at the fish, the size generally, sometimes the spots. I knew when I was in my teens, I forget now, but I knew back then. I could tell generally some of the difference on the sockeye and that.
And how is traditional knowledge about fishing passed down to younger generations?
Well, it's getting more and more difficult because of the lack of fishing itself. You know, take for instance, we didn't have food fish for the last 5 years. And this year we managed to get some, but now they got the fishing industry down to hours, being open for hours for the whole season. You know, 12-hour openings. Pretty hard to make a living. It's pretty hard to teach the younger generation because you're not wanting to take a chance on a greenhorn. You want your most experienced guy there so that you can use that 12 hours. Nothing goes wrong. So, but it has generally been passed down. I fully expected to be a fisherman when I grew up, just like my cousin Brian. But I went and got an education instead. The different families, they teach their kids how and where to fish, how to build a seine net, and all of that.
And if DFO is making use of that knowledge?
I'm not the best one to answer that because I'm not on the board of Applegate, but all of our fish stuff goes through Applegate. But apparently they've developed a relationship with DFO for collecting statistics. And they report it. We report all of our food fish that we catch each season by species and quantity. And name the families they go to. We are trying to build our credibility up with DFO to get into management decisions in the local area. It's important for us to deal one-on-one with DFO because Johnson Straits always seemed to be a controversial place in terms of the rest of the coast. And that's probably just the location and the fact that a lot of fish can be caught out of it.
I'd like to ask you a few questions about FSC fishing. Beginning with, if you could briefly describe the ways in which FSC fishing is important to Weckletalk today.
Oh, we rely on all kinds of fish, not just the salmon, but we got lots of other types of marine resources in our area. We like to catch it, whether it be cod or halibut or herring or shellfish. We've got that, but it's really important to all of our families that we get that. It always has been, even before the Sparrow decision, where that decision was made as a right. We used to, before we come in with our seine boats, set aside a few hundred fish for the village to get their food fish.
I understand that Weckletalk manages its FSC allocation to the Applegate Fisheries Society. I wonder if you could describe how that works.
Yeah, we used to be all together in Johnson Straits with the First Nations north of us, but we split off of it, created our own fisheries society with Applegate. But we all have the same communal license for sockeye, and I think it's somewhere around 80,000 pieces.
And from there, you divide them up between the 5 participant First Nations.
Well, it's up to the way we catch our fish, food fish, for our 5 bands is each of the families take the responsibility to look after their own families with their different boats.
And you're using modern boats and gear to
Yeah,
harvest FSC fish.
yeah, quite often our guys are contracted by other bands further down on the South Island to catch their food fish for them.
Is there anything you would do to improve the FSC fishery?
Well, I know it's always been controversial, but I personally am against selling of food fish. You know, not against selling, just I think it's a management issue. You know, if you're gonna catch fish for the purpose of selling, you should be able to issue a license to that person for that purpose. But food fish should be for the people and not be sold.
I'd like to talk a little bit about, okay. I wonder if you could very briefly describe the connection between Lekwaltak Indian reserves and modern fishery for your fishing practices.
Well, the way we always believed that Department of Indian Affairs limited the size of our reserves. We try to get bigger reserves. You take the biggest reserve in our district, the King Munch Reserve is around 1,200 acres. And what we had the surveyor set aside was about double that. And the same way we needed a bunch of other reserves. But we're told by Indian Affairs that we can't have it because we don't make a living off the land, and we make our living off the sea. And they granted our reserves. We've got about a dozen reserves, and they vary from 10 acres up to the 1,200 acres. Most of them are between 100 and 200 acres. But they're located for the purpose of providing us access to our marine resources. Then after that it was all said and done, given to us, we find we're alienated from these marine resources by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. It's like Indian Affairs didn't have any right to make a commitment like that to us. So we kind of feel that you know, there's an obligation on the Crown to provide access to our marine resources in Johnson Strait so we can make a living.
We've heard over the past couple of days about some new organizations like the ITO and the First Nations Fisheries Council, and I wonder if you could provide your view on those organizations and their role.
Yeah, we have a representative on the Fisheries Council. But, you know, we've had a hard time dealing with issues between our First Nations. You know, we're definitely in the commercial fishing industry. We want to be able to make a living there within our territory. And a lot of issues come up about that. We're not against any of these organizations, but what we do want is the right to make our own representations. We don't want them to be representing us. We want to represent ourselves directly with government.
Thank you. Another point that's been raised by other participants is the suggestion that the fishery might move towards a terminal fishery, and I wonder what's your view on that?
Well, that'll push us right out of the industry. We're not against anybody getting their fish, but we still would like to make a living in the Johnson Straits area.
And I just have two more quick questions. Are there any other processes or forums that you think Lekwaltok should be invited to participate in?
Well, the Fraser panel, my cousin was telling me we don't have a technical person on the Fraser panel for the coast. And I think that's the most powerful decision-making body on the coast. The recommendations that come out of there.
And just one concluding question. Could you describe what you see as Lekwaltok's future role in the fishery?
Well, I think the biggest complaint over all these years that we've had is their licensing system. It's basically blocked just about all of us on the coast out of the fishing industries. When they changed the A license to restrict it to just salmon, I don't think that most of our people on the coast understood that. Before the Davis plan, you could catch everything under that one license. I think we should be issued a license like that for us to be able to make it in any industry.
Thank you. That concludes my questions, Mr. Commissioner. There's one other item I'd like to address. I have a binder of documents. The documents are public documents prepared by Crown officials and obtained from archival sources during research for litigation and other processes. The last two documents are extracts from books on Aboriginal fishing. These documents concern the allocation of Indian reserves as fishing stations around the turn of the century and the government policies in force at that time. We have circulated the documents about 9 or 10 days ago, and we provided copies to the Commission for uploading onto Ringtail. We also wrote to the Commission late last week to propose that the documents be entered as exhibits by consent. I don't propose to take Mr. Naknacken through the documents today, but we would like to have them entered as exhibits so that we can rely on them if necessary when the Commission hears evidence on the history of the regulation of Aboriginal fisheries in the new year.
Mr. Commissioner, I understand, and I believe my friend has circulated to Council for all participants a letter asking whether any participant raises objection to these documents going in ostensibly by consent. The Commission's not aware of any response to that request. I take it from what my friend has said that he's asking the documents go in but does not intend to put them to his witness today. I might suggest, Mr. Commissioner, that it may be useful if he's seeking to have such a large bulk of documents go in that he address the issue of their relevance to your mandate and how it is that he intends to use them in the future in the hearing or expects you to use them. I don't want to take up a bunch of our hearing time to do that because I know we're tight on time, but I wonder if you might find some further information on that helpful before receiving the documents.
What I would suggest, Mr. McGowan, Mr. Hickling, is that this list, which I presume all participants council have, of what are described as a document index, what I would suggest is that we take the next letter available for identification purposes. We identify, use that letter, whatever it is. Mr. Registrar, what is the next letter?
R.
Thank you. We use R1 through 19 for identification purposes. That in the interim, at your convenience, Mr. Hickling, if you could provide Commission Council with a letter outlining your submission with respect to the relevance of these documents for the purposes of this Commission's mandate. And then, if and when you do come back and refer to some of these documents, at that time, if there's no opposition, they could be marked. But at that time, if Commission Council have a submission to make, they can make it at the time you're intending to put the document to witness.
I'm certainly content with that, Mr. Commissioner, and it may well be that my friend does intend to put these documents to a witness down the road and they can go in through the usual course, but I'm content with your suggestion.
So it would be R1 through 19 marked for identification purposes, and Mr. Registrar can have a copy of this document index so that that can be noted in his records as R through 1 through 19.
It would be so long.
Council for the Muskama Zauding Tribal Council, which henceforth I will refer to as the MTTC. Chief Mountain, Gila Kasla. Could you please describe the 4 member nations of the MTTC?
The 4 members are the Quiqsutaniq, Awawanuk, the Nungis, and the Kinkum Band. And they're all, and Guildford is comprised of 2 bands, the Guapmis as well too, but they're amalgamated.
Thank you. And could you please describe the general territory, the shared territory of these 4 nations?
Yeah, the shared territory of the tribal council is generally what is referred to as the Broughton Archipelago. Up in the northeast end of Vancouver Island, it's between the mainland and Vancouver Island.
Thank you. And could you please tell us about your experience fishing as a child? Who taught you how to fish? Where did you fish? What methods did you use?
Well, as a child, I basically lived on a boat with my parents and my grandparents, doing all types of fishing in our rivers of our territory, where we would go in, and there were still some traps in some of these rivers that we would use, weirs and traps that we'd go and check. When I was young, I didn't know where they were, but as I grew older, I found out that they were in our general territory in the Knights Inlet area, where we'd go and collect fish. But a lot of my time was spent on a commercial boat with my grandfather and my father, table seining. But a lot of other collection of food was food and social and ceremonial, where we drag seined in our river, and that was part of my upbringing.
And those rivers you described as being in the Broughton Archipelago area?
Yeah, basically they were in some of the local streams in Viner Sound, in Atta Creek, and Charles Creek, and in Call Inlet, and Protection Creek, general streams in the close vicinity of Village Island.
Thank you. Have you ever observed or caught Fraser River sockeye in the rivers that you fished in as a child?
At the time, I knew that there was a difference, but I didn't know that they were Fraser, but you could clearly tell that the Fraser River fish and the timing of the year, fishing in June, July, that the Fraser River fish were a lot larger than the local stocks. The local stocks were a lot smaller in our creeks, basically 6 to 8 pounds, the fish that we caught in the local streams. And the Fraser River fish that were also caught following the local stocks were at least 10 to 12 pounds and slightly different color.
So were you observing then adult Fraser River sockeye on their migration southward in these areas?
Yeah, we basically, when we did catch them, we kept them. We didn't throw them back. But a lot of people didn't care. They were just went there food fish. And a lot of the fish that we caught in the Nimkish River, I think at least 20 or 30% of the food fish we catch, if we caught 200, you probably catch about 60 of them would be the Fraser River fish when we drag seine.
Thank you. And Chief Mountain, can you speak about the changes that you've observed in your lifetime in the stocks that spawn in the MTTC traditional territory?
A lot of concerns are brought about the assessment done in the creeks. We've done a lot of work, and I've walked quite a few of these streams where a lot of them aren't recorded now, but we used to always see 20, 30,000 fish in some of these smaller streams. And then in bigger streams like Kinkin and Wakeman, you'd basically see 100,000, 200,000 fish in these streams. And even in the Nimkish, there used to be 100, 200,000, but historically there was 1.2 million in the Nimkish River alone. That was just for sockeye, not counting the chums, coho, and springs. But as the years progressed, when as a guardian, we'd be assessing these streams by foot and floating the rivers and by helicopter or fixed plane. And there's a noticeable drop over the last 20 years of hardly any fish going into the local streams. Even the Nimkish river streams, they're drastic decline. I used to swim in pools where there'd be 20,000 sockeye in there, and later on in the years, basically had 1,000 in there when, the drastic decline in the last 20 years.
Are the MTDC involved in efforts to rehabilitate some of these stocks?
There has been a lot of talk with DFO, and at one point that they wanted to put a hatchery on the Kinkum River and talk about enhancing a lot of the other local streams in the mainland. And on the Nimkish River, there is a hatchery, and they have been trying to keep the stock steady, but there's no money coming from DFO, so there's lack of capacity for funding to actually do a lot of this enhancement projects that need to be done on the mainland and the Nimkish River. So basically, where our hands are tied, we aren't actually basically doing much at all.
Okay. What today is the main source of food fishery for the MTDC nations?
Today, everybody fishes the Johnson Strait fishery, which is the Fraser River sockeye, because of, like I said previous, all our streams have no more fish in there. Some of the major streams like Kinkin and Wakeman, a few years ago you had 50, and just this last year they had 700 or 800. So people do not want to fish those streams and lakes because they're already depleted. So all the villages in the area and the other nations like from Alert Bay and Port Hardy, they all fish the Johnson Strait sockeye fishery, Fraser River sockeye.
Thank you. And could you please speak about the cultural significance of salmon to the Musqueam people?
Well, it's on the same lines as Rod has said, that it's a cultural significance for us in a lot of our songs and dance, and even our creation story, where we heard that how our salmon was created and how it symbolizes our culture and tradition. And also the twins in our family have their own song, the Salmon Dance song, which signifies the abundance that we have, and hopefully that we're going to get more sockeye, so we have that dance in our big house. And it's for me growing up, I grew up with my grandparents, and basically we lived on sockeye salmon. We would have salmon 3 times a day, and snacks. We'd have our dried fish, and it was a staple every day when I was growing up, and it's not the same now.
Chief Mountain, we know from your witness statement that you were an Aboriginal fisheries guardian. You were the supervisor of that program in DFO's Area 12, which is also the Musqueam territory. Could you, in that role as a supervisor of that program, are you familiar with the test fishery in Johnson Strait of the Fraser River sockeye?
Yes, I am.
Could you please tell us your views on the effectiveness of the test fishery as it relates to traditional knowledge, and if it's changed over time, the conduct of that test fishery?
Well, I remember way back when I was still commercial fishery at the time when DFO was doing the test fishery, and all the fishermen were wondering what DFO was doing. Why are they fishing on the bum tides? Why are they opening it up and on the biggest tides when we know it's dangerous out there? And basically they would make sets at the wrong times when there's no fish. And previous to what the fishery, test fishery is now, there's basically 2 boats during the sockeye and maybe 3 boats during the chum fishery doing the test fishery, when there used to be way more test boats out there when they first started out. So you're not getting an accurate number of what is really out there. And just like Rod was saying, all the elders know when there's a lot of fish out there. But the way DFO is doing the testing on the wrong tides, the backup tides, you cannot get an accurate number of what's really out there.
Thank you. Chief Mountain, are there salmon farms in the MTTC traditional territory?
Yes, there's currently there's 29 farms out there which are not licensed right now, but DFO's taken them over and are supposed to license them in December, and there's 1 pending application for license as well.
Now, recognizing we're going to have, I think, at least a week of hearings on the subject of aquaculture, I'm just going to ask you some questions in respect to your communications with DFO about the farms in your territory. Have you been involved in communications with DFO about TTC's traditional knowledge and experience that you've had observing changes in your territory from the presence of these farms?
Yes. Around the year 1999, 2000, 2001, where there was a noticeable increase in these fish farms from 100,000 fish to up to 500,000 or 600,000 fish, we noticed, and our traditional knowledge holders, our clam diggers, our fishermen, and people who lived out in the village noticed a lot of changes out there to deal with all our resources, clam beds, shellfish, groundfish, and it was brought to the attention of the leadership back then. So there's a big change that traditionally everybody would notice because they live out in the territory and they're on the grounds every day and fishing every day. That's their life, and they've noticed all those changes, and it's being documented, and a lot of this information is brought to DFO, and they do know.
Do you feel that DFO has been responsive to these communications?
No. We bring our concerns forward, and it's the same old thing when we meet with them. We'll come back to you, or we'll ask our superiors what to do, but we do not usually hear anything back, and there's no action taken.
Thank you. Chief Mountain, are any of the MTTC member nations in an ARM body or receiving ARM funding currently?
Right now, I know that the MTC bodies, none of them have, but we've all applied, and for whatever reason, DFO rejected all our applications. The 3 other bands, Kinkum, Hopetown, and Guilford, applied on their own, and the Numbies applied on their own, but neither of our proposals got accepted, so no, right now we don't have any arrow money.
So currently, what is your arrangement with DFO? What's your forum that you use to engage in management discussions with DFO?
A lot of our decisions is the Numbies has their own fisheries, and the Kinkum, Hopetown, and Guilford have their own AFS agreement as well. So we do have, each band that does have a fisheries organization, and also my position, mine is strictly dealing with resources in the territory as it pertains to fish farms. So we do have a lot of interaction with DFO from our AFS agreements.
Thank you. I'm just going to conclude with a couple of questions to you around how the MTTC nations communicate with other First Nations around the sharing of the Fraser River fishery. are the MTT nations involved in forums, groups, organizations, where that kind of communication happens?
Yeah, we have some counselors on our band who attend a lot of these meetings in Vancouver and Richmond to do with the Fraser Panel or the Frog Committee and the IMOG Committee. I'm not exactly sure what they stand for. I see these acronyms on the letterheads when we receive them, but our counselors do attend them, and I know the other bands have representation on them as well. So they are at the table, and just like Rod said, we're our attendants, but we're not part of the decision-making body. It's just information that DFO brings to us, so we're basically not there making any decisions, we're there to listen. So that needs to change.
And have you been involved in meetings facilitated by the First Nations Fisheries Council?
Yes, I was at a few meetings as a fish council. I haven't been to all of them. I was basically there when it first started, when they created the First Nations Fishery Council Action Plan, and where we all got together to actually to work together with all the Coast First Nations and the Fraser River First Nations, get rid of our differences, because we all know we're all fishing for the same fish, the Fraser River sockeye fish. So we had to stop pointing fingers, and we had to learn to share, because the Fraser River sockeye fishery passes everybody's doorstep and spawns in a few First Nations territories. So we're all after the same thing, and we had to unite, and there was actually a meeting in Prince Rupert where a number of us were there, and the word is we need to have unity on all this fishery resource, and conservation was also the #1 topic about that Fraser River fish as well.
Thank you, Chief Mountain. Those are my questions.